This is the Impunity Observer podcast. We're here with author Ralph Pezzullo and retired decorated CIA officer Gary Berntsen. Ralph is the author of Stolen Elections, the Takedown of Democracies Worldwide. Gary and his partner Martin Rodil are referred to in the book as whistleblowers. They conducted a 4-year investigation into electoral fraud in the United States in the 2020 election. This led to many other countries and a Venezuelan criminal cartel. I urge everyone who values liberty to read this book. It exposes the 2020 election fraud in the United States and much more. Venezuelans working for Hugo Chavez created a system to steal elections so successful that they participated not only in U.S. frauds, but those of at least 71 other countries. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Steve. My pleasure.
Thank you for having us, Steve.
Ralph, why did you write this book?
Well, in about a year and a half ago, I was a friend of mine from former DEA agent was visiting Los Angeles where I live. And he invited me to lunch. He said, I want you to meet the most interesting man that I know. And it turned out to be Martin Rodil. Over lunch, he told me that he had been conducting an investigation into election fraud, which definitely perked up my ears. And he invited me to see a presentation the next day. He said, you're going to need about 4 hours. So I said, okay. I went to a house he was renting, and he showed me a 4-hour PowerPoint presentation that really just blew my mind because it was so extensive. It was so well done and just showed that, our elections have basically been tampered with since 2006. And afterwards, I asked him, I said, well, this is incredible. How can I help you? And he said, my partner and I would like you to write a book. And I asked who his partner was. He said, Gary Berntsen. Well, Gary Berntsen is a very good friend of mine. We had written the bestseller Jawbreaker together back in 2005 about his going into Afghanistan after 9/11, recruiting a team of CIA operatives and special forces groups, and basically overthrowing the Taliban in several weeks, and then chasing bin Laden into Tora Bora. So Gary and I were old friends. I said, of course, and then I got involved. That's how I got involved.
That's great. Well, now this is a very touchy subject, and how did you get the book published?
Well, it was difficult. I immediately realized I've worked with a lot of mainstream publishers, and I thought of all the editors I know, and I realized like this would be too controversial for them. And I reached out to one publisher that I knew, a well-known publisher, and he was very enthusiastic to do the book. He wanted to see the presentation, and Martin graciously arranged to go to New York to show him the presentation. And he was super excited to do the book up until about 2 weeks before the 2024 election. And then suddenly he put on the brakes. And Gary and I both spoke to him several times to sort of reassure him that, this was all true and backed up and so on. And he basically blocked the book for almost a year until I was able to get out of the contract and have just recently published it myself.
One of the other ways he was able to publish it is that I didn't write it with him, because as a CIA officer, if I had written the book, co-authored the book with Ralph, I would have had to go to the Publication Review Board to get it cleared. And the CIA would have given us a very, very difficult time with this book because, sadly, they're involved with members of the Venezuelan regime that were involved in this. Unfortunately, sadly, they have a hand in all this. When we put Jawbreaker out 20 years, we had a bit of a fight. I had to get a lawyer. I had to fight with them to get the Publication Review Board to release the book. I mean, they did redact quite a bit. We did multiple revisions to get it out. But the irony is that Ralph and I knew each other from 20 years ago, and it wasn't me that asked him to write the book, and and I was interviewed for the book. Ralph, of course, is a great writer. He's been a best-selling author. How many times? 6, 7 times?
Times, yeah.
Yeah. So Ralph's really, and he would have been my first choice, and it turned out that he was asked to do it, and I was thrilled when I learned it. And so then I was interviewed by Ralph, and we did talk, quite a bit after he did write it, because then the issue is how do you get the book out when a lot of people in the world are trying to block you?
Well, it's a great story, Gary, and I think it's very important that this get out. And if any listeners are thinking that we're going to discuss exactly how the fraud occurred, I suggest to them they read the book. I want to discuss the implications of it and what you just brought up about the resistance to it. I think that this is a critical subject for not only the American public, which of course it is, but worldwide, and especially in Latin America. So tell me, Gary, how did you feel in 2023 when the FBI agent for whom you made a presentation of the criminal fraud with the evidence that you have told you to flee the country because Department of Justice officials will destroy you, discredit you, or put you in jail?
We met with Martine and I met with an FBI officer, a senior officer in Washington, D.C., in a law firm, and we did the full presentation. And when the presentation was finished, that FBI officer said, "Mr. Berntsen, I recommend that you and your partner flee the city, and that you not give this to the FBI, because senior FBI officers will do their best to destroy your presentation, and they will find a way to prosecute you, to keep you from bringing this to light, because it is not in their interest, it is not in this administration's interest to have these facts which you have presented known." And so I was a little shocked by that statement. Told that FBI officer we weren't going to be fleeing the city, but that we would go to others. That FBI officer said go to the Congress and go to the media. Well, we did both. We went to the Congress, we went to the media, and 99% of them wanted nothing to do with us. They had been investigated. Some of them had been investigated by the FBI earlier. They were part of this Arctic Frost campaign, right? It's become public now that the FBI was investigating anyone who challenged 2020. I learned, too, in the last year or two that there were investigations of me by the FBI. I got to go to a law firm recently and see some of the discovery, which had FBI officers investigating me. This was from even before the investigation, because I was a Republican, a conservative Republican, and I got targeted by one office of the FBI, and a former very senior FBI officer was hired to investigate me as well. They found nothing because I wasn't doing anything wrong. Trying to save the country is what we were trying to do. And so I alerted to Ralph to all of this when we began the process of this. I did, a year before the 2024 election, move myself and my family out of the country, and I went to Switzerland for a year so that we could finish the work that we were doing. And I just want to say, it's not just Martine Rodil and I. There are others. There were other important people in the United States that stepped up. Look, we couldn't find anybody to help to finance us. The one very brave person that stepped up was Patrick Byrne, stepped up to finance us. And he was able to help us with the financing, get enough of the engineers together to break the engineering. We knew the story early. We knew several years ago who did it, when they did it, where they did it, generally how they did it. But you needed a team of witnesses that we recruited to really get to the heart of the engineering of it. And Patrick Byrne helped us with that, was a critical man in doing that. He was very brave for doing that, because once you became affiliated with us, the Bureau was pursuing you. One man went out we were in Switzerland. We had a lot of our people abroad with us there. And when he landed in the United States, the FBI picked him up. And they wanted to know what Russia helping us. There were no Russians helping us. They wanted to know if Gary Berntsen and Martine Rodil were working with the bloody Russians. There's no Russians. It's insanity. Spent my life as a officer of the clandestine service working against the Russians, not working with the Russians. Give me a break. But the people in the Biden administration before, because they pursued the president of the United States that way. They pursued people in his administration that way. They had this insane, 2016 fixation on the Russians, which was all just insane. And they're here in 2024, they were going to try to do it again. Didn't work.
Well, I hate to say this, but the actions of the government doesn't surprise me. I've been fighting against the same thing in different ways, mostly with the State Department. So really not surprising. But what's another thing that stands out to me is, that first FBI guy you spoke to, he was correct, because in the book it says that as someone who risked his life for the United States multiple times, you were shocked that the Department of Justice leaked your information to the Venezuelan cartel. So you saw Justice Department collusion with the cartel.
Well, we saw the intelligence community's collusion, not Justice Department. We saw the intelligence communities leaking this to cartel members, working with them. Yeah,
I see.
They were their partners. Sadly, not in the Trump administration, but in the Biden administration, they were their partners. Well, right now they're their partners still. There is a level of collusion with. They have sources that are in the cartel that they meet with regularly, and that agency source relationship is essentially cover for the collusion that they are doing, that the intelligence community has done with the Venezuelan cartel over the years. They've been meeting with these regularly. They're right now trying to put them in office instead of the individuals that won the election. They want their cartel light format as a new government in Venezuela, as Maduro and his people get kicked out. That's what the intelligence community is trying to orchestrate right now. We should be working for the people that won the election, that were denied the election.
Do you mean to say that our intelligence community is thinking that if Maduro gets kicked out, they have to figure out another way to do the same thing?
They don't want people that are affiliated with the cartel, because they think that's the easiest way to transition without violence. That's what their excuse is. But you need that cartel to leave, because they are the largest transnational criminal organization in the history of mankind. They're worth $2.7 trillion. That criminal cartel, from oil and drug money and everything else they've stolen, and they have infected the planet. And Ralph can add to that.
Yeah, and it's not only Venezuela. They work in concert with Cuba, China, Russia, and Iran. So you're talking about an international criminal cartel that is corrupting our government, our intelligence community, and stealing and manipulating the results of our elections right under our noses.
And would you say that this is also part of the domestic opposition to Trump in the United States?
I think it's all of a piece. And when you look at it, even through the information that was revealed by Doge, when Doge closed down USAID, you find all of these taxpayer money going to all of these NGOs that were basically supporting the election fraud and the criminal cartel. And a big part of it was an organization called CEPS that was giving billions of dollars, promoting, actually marketing the election fraud system to other countries in the world.
So U.S. government money was being directed to organizations that were stealing the election.
Yes.
That's astounding. That has to end.
And we were paying for that as taxpayers. We were paying for our own elections and other elections being stolen. So there's a lot of cleanup that has to be done. Let's put it that way. A lot of cleanup.
When President Trump put Elon Musk to start opening these things, it gave us access that we would have never had to records that showed this, that showed that the election fraud had migrated into our foreign affairs institutions, and that the United States, that American taxpayers were funding this through CEPS and I think we spent $6.9 billion on funding the election machines around the world to steal elections, to turn countries to the left. It was 99% of the time to the left. This was
So
a wicked, clever conspiracy, global conspiracy. And look, it gives me no joy to state that the organization, I'm a retired CIA officer, worked a lot of people were heroic and in support of the Constitution, to see that these things have occurred. But in the past 15 years, there were changes in leadership beginning the Obama period in 2008 and the Brennan period that altered our national apparatus and the premier intelligence organization in the United States, the CIA, and they did things that they I mean, there's evidence too that they used that organization, against the president of the United States, right? Remember, they set up special cells that work with the FBI and all of this that John Brennan did, are just, it took the agency in a path, a participation in domestic politics that it had never done before.
they politicized the entire government, including intelligence.
That's right. And as you know, Steve, from your own research, our State Department was actually promoting this system of electronic voter fraud to other countries, trying to get them to adopt this software.
Yes, we saw that in Guatemala. The International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Bureau of the State Department was the major element in Guatemalan fraud.
Yeah. So that's how deep this mechanism of corruption went.
I was actually called, Steve,
Yeah,
right
go ahead.
after our election. I had done a video before the election where I was stating that, Smartmatic and Dominion were involved in a global conspiracy with the Venezuelans to do this. And almost immediately after the American election, there was an election in Georgia that was stolen. And I was called by their national security advisor and former minister of Interior. They told me that the U.S. Embassy compelled them to use those machines. That election, which was stolen and went for the Russian party there, which was kind of a shock for the people. And a very brave woman who was the president there was fighting back. But,
Well, it is shocking, and it's consistent with all these things tied together. And it seems to me that the entire free world has an interest, even the people of the not free world have an interest in exposing this and correcting it, because that way the will of peoples in the various countries will have a much better chance of being expressed, as opposed to being imposed on by these totalitarians, which is what our government is loaded with.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I mean, this whole effort, which is involves many countries, which I explained before, is basically to thwart the will of people all over the world, to choose their own leaders, to choose their own form of government, to choose their own policies.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how they do this. As I understand it, the method that the Venezuelan criminal cartel uses to steal elections is through remote access to election machines. Now, they activate a backdoor to the software that runs the election machines by using source code that only they have. And as I understand it, the CIA created this remote access system. How did it get into the Venezuelan cartel's hands?
that some of the techniques that are used were very similar to things that I had seen during my career in the agency, and how we clandestinely communicate with people. And they were evident in those machines. And we had people who had sensitive positions in the CIA with me as advisors to the Office of Technical Services that looked at it and said, that's exactly how we do it. And so, it was no coincidence. And sadly, many of the senior people involved in the conspiracy on the technical side had clandestine relationships with the agency as well, and that we knew of. And so it's look, what I'm saying right now, people are going to hear this, and some people from my former organization are going to hear this, and they're going to be a little shocked and going to think, what the hell is Gary Berntsen saying and doing? And what I can say is that we have a dozen witnesses in the United States that have all testified. They're testifying to the Department of Justice now. They're explaining what they did and how they did it and who funded them and how this all worked. So first off, read the book and then stand by, because prosecutions are going to follow. That's all I could, that's what I can say about that.
Yeah, that is we hope that happens. That what and the proof of all this is that you turned this over to our government during Biden. In other words, it seems that you were expecting that these people were going to do their job, that were going to comply with their oath, and instead of doing that, they turned on you.
At one point, we, my business partner and I, and our attorney, my primary business partner and I, and our attorney sat in front of a U.S. attorney and his key staff. We did the full 3.5 hour demonstration. He was shocked. His people were horrified. They took copious notes. They wrote the notes up and they sent them to the Department of Justice, the Office of Professional Integrity, and they told us to wait that the FBI would contact us to debrief us further. No one ever contacted us. What they did was investigate us. They never contacted us. We would have given them everything. We offered to give them access to all of our witnesses at that point during the Biden administration. They did not take those witnesses. They didn't want to see those witnesses. And the truth is that's because they were colluding with them.
So that's why it's critically important that the administration of Donald Trump investigate all of this and prosecute those for whom there is evidence against.
Yeah, they're in the process.
Well, that's good news. Very good news.
Yeah, and the part of it is that Gary and Martine, when they were briefing people in 2023, they also went to various congressional and Senate offices on both sides of the aisle, and there was really only one senator who took them seriously and followed up, and that was Mark Mullins from Oklahoma.
I spent about 2.5 or so years trying to explain to Congress, at least the Republicans, about State Department criminality, starting with Guatemala. And what you're saying doesn't surprise me, because really they take no action.
Yeah, they don't want to hear it.
But back to the book. In the book, you say that the main company the Venezuelan cartel used for electoral fraud was Smartmatic. And in response to attacks on Smartmatic, the cartel changed companies several times, but they always using the same software that runs the machines. And as I understand it, nobody can see the back door unless they have the source code. Now, how has that cartel been able to hide this source code for so long? Considering the importance of election integrity, isn't there a way for the authorities to ensure there are no backdoors to election machines?
Well, it's interesting because in 2006, when the cartel first started using this software in the form of Smartmatic, they migrated it to Sequoia, another company, and then to Dominion. There were a number of people who called out that this system was corrupted. One was a State Department officer at the embassy in Caracas who wrote a long cable that sort of laid all this out. That this company, even though they had tried to hide their corporate ownership, was really owned by the Venezuelan regime. What happened to that cable, we don't know. It was signed off by the ambassador. It went into the system. Yeah, and nobody acted on it. Then Congressman Mahoney in New York City She also wrote a letter to the Treasury Department calling out, questioning the leadership of this company and saying, it looks to me, yeah, Carolyn Maloney, the Treasury Department investigated that, but nothing really, the cartel was able to continue their shell game, move the software from company to company and hide their tracks, right? And then also in California, when Sequoia applied to run elections in California in 2007, an investigation took place conducted by experts at MIT and Berkeley and so on, and they said, well, this software is garbage. There's so many back doors into it. It looks like it was designed to steal elections. So California in 2007 rejected the election software. But after 2007, there was a change of governors, and Schwarzenegger, who was a Republican, lost the election, and Brown, who was a Democrat, and they got rid of the system of checking.
It's difficult, huh? So, and this continued right into the 2020 election.
Look at the leadership of California, of all the major cities in California. It doesn't accurately reflect the wishes of the voters.
The will of the people. Yeah. Well, when I was watching the 2024 election, as all Americans, we had a big interest in it. I saw the Democrats seemed too confident to me, seemed too confident that Kamala Harris was going to win, despite being an obviously awful candidate. And plus they had the results of Democrat policies were so bad that I'm wondering how can they win? And it occurred to me only through fraud. Now we saw that Trump won, and he won pretty convincingly. And my question is, how was that fraud stopped? Why weren't they able to steal the 2024 election?
Well, there's a couple of things. First off, the machines function very well and they can steal elections anywhere from 0 up to about 5%. We usually say it's like the 3 to 5% is the maximum. Once you get over that, it becomes so evident that they back off. They will not try to steal an election if it's a 20-point swing, because they'll be seen. They are very, very clever about looking at a state and shaving. So, like if you looked at a state like Colorado, for instance, you might have 80% of the districts are rural, small districts, and then there's 3 or 4 districts that are, like Colorado Springs and Denver, that are heavily Democratic. So what they'll do is they'll shave in all those other areas. The other point in that final election, in that last election, is that 2024 is that they were running these things, the swing states, out of Serbia. So in Serbia, Dominion had set up an office which was called like their research office, that was run by a roommate of the owner of the company. The owner of the company was named John Polis. There's a guy named Obradovic was the owner of managing the office in Serbia. But that Serbian office had like 98 individuals who were Serbians, Venezuelans, and a couple of Chinese that were managing the swing states. And unfortunately, they had some technical problems and were not able to completely execute their mission. This was an office that had huge Huawei servers too. So a U.S. election in the swing states was being saved and communicated on Chinese Huawei servers out of Serbia.
And a lot of people have been conditioned to reject this. I mean, they've spent huge amounts of money and effort to convince people that there was no fraud and that anybody who says there is a conspiracy theorist. So a lot of people are going to reflexively reject what you guys are saying. And it seems to me that the key thing here is that you have a mountain of evidence that you have already delivered to the U.S. government in exchange for absolutely nothing.
people will be prosecuted and they will confess. They will plead guilty ultimately, and it's a slow process when you take people to look. The president of Smartmatic right now is in jail in Miami for election theft in the Philippines. What they believed, everyone believed, was it was like that he made payments to win the contract. No, they had payments made to fix the election. Look, Fox News, Smartmatic, Fox News, Newsmax, a host of other individuals have been sued, right? Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell have all been sued by the election companies. Guess what? No one has sued me. They don't dare sue me or Martine Rodil because you want to go to Discovery with us? You want to see all our witnesses? Come on, let's interview. We have enough witnesses. We need a damn Greyhound bus to move them around.
We were warned by their Smartmatic lawyers a year ago.
They sent us a lawyer and said, stop disparaging us. Oh, please. These people are just trying to destroy global democracy. You think we're going to be stopped by a letter? No. And they haven't sued us. They haven't sued us because they don't want to go into Discovery because they know that all they're doing right now is buying time. They're buying time to try to hide and escape and to move off of this because the game is over. The game's over.
So that means people like Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, and many others who stood up to this thing are going to be vindicated by all that you've done, and more importantly, the U.S. public is going to be educated and maybe pay more attention to electoral integrity.
The story of what happened, it's outlined in the book. And so basically, after the 2020 election, the Trump election team had strong evidence that that fraud had taken place. And Gary and Martine approached them at that point and offered to share their information with them, but told them, hey, hold off in announcing anything because we need to do more investigation. We need to, Gary in particular, his specialty is doing international criminal investigations, and the way you do that is that you recruit sources from within the criminal conspiracy, and that takes time, right? They were just at the beginning of their investigation in 2020 after the election. And so they kind of told Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani where they were going with the investigation, but warned them not to say anything yet. Well, they came out. They were so motivated and being pressured by so much pressure that Sidney Powell came out and said, we're going to release the Kraken. Well, what she was talking about was the information that Gary and Martine had collected.
Well, in a strange way, the fact that they stole that election gave us the Biden regime, which is, in my opinion, the worst in the entire history of the United States. And I think everything we've talked about today coincides with that. And let the American public see that. And then your work has helped contributed to keeping them from stealing the 2024 election. And now we have a chance to take back the country for its people, seems to me. Now, I would say that Donald Trump is doing a great job no matter what he does with the economy. He can make the greatest economy in history. He can do many, many, many things. But if he does not expose and rid our government of the traitors we have inside of it, they'll be back, and eventually his government will have been a passing thing and won't have contributed to the long-term liberty and welfare of the United States. You guys agree with that?
Totally correct, Steve. But as Gary has pointed out, the Justice Department is very vigorously pursuing all this right now, and you're seeing some symptoms of it in different places. The warships off the coast of Venezuela, the fact that the administration has deemed the Venezuelan regime to be a terrorist organization. Some of the things that are going on in the whole Russiagate investigation. And this criminal conspiracy, and you saw so many signs of it in the Biden administration, the open border, the letting in of members of Tren de la Ragua that are Venezuelan terrorists into our country to disrupt communities and spread crime and drug dealing and child trafficking and so on. This is all part of the same thing. They were basically, what they were trying to do is to weaken the United States, to pit us against one another, and undermine our institutions. And all you have to do is look around, and you can see that they've gone pretty far. I mean, we were kind of on the brink. Thank God that the 2024 election went the way it did, and now this information is being investigated and being exposed.
Well, I certainly agree with that, and I could say that I've noticed what you just described as classic Marxism. I've been watching that since I was a junior at Columbia University College in 1968, and communists took over the school, morphed into the Weather Underground that developed the Prairie Fire model, and they've been trying to overthrow the U.S. government for a long time, and it looks like this is a continuation of exactly that same thing, and this is our opportunity to do something about that. I got further involved when I noticed State Department criminality in 2011, 2012 in Guatemala. And that has led me to where I am today. And I've written a lot about exactly what you just said, that our government is not, our federal bureaucracy, there are people buried into it that are working against it. And now what you guys are working on is bringing that right to the forefront, is exactly what we need. And we hope that the entire government, the CIA, State Department, and every other agency where these people are working, we hope that what you guys, the work that you're doing, is vindicated with successful exposure and prosecutions.
What we've witnessed
Is a new form of hybrid war. The cartel was completely underestimated by the United States.
It's all part of a piece, Steve. And so, as Gary and Martine got further into this, they started finding the connections between. I mean, the money. A lot of the direction was coming from Cuba. A lot of the strategy was coming from Cuba. The money was coming from Venezuela, and most people don't understand how rich of a country Venezuela is. Not only do they have the highest oil reserves in the world, the largest oil reserves in the world, they also, when Hugo Chavez became president in 1999, they started to establish an organization called the Cartel del Sol, which was run by their military, and today controls all drug trafficking in the Western Hemisphere. So they control everything from the growers in Bolivia to the labs in Colombia, to the shippers, to the cartels in Mexico. All the cartels in Mexico work for them, and as Gary mentioned before, they generate something between $2 and $4 trillion a year. So this is the bank. They are the ones who are able to fund.
Well, it sounds like you're describing the most pressing national security issue in the United States today.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And the biggest threat to our country in history, really.
Well, we need awareness by the population, and I hope that your book is contributing to that. And Gary's work is spectacular, and a lot of courage takes to do that. And I think it's pretty obvious.
Of this story, they were two men who dedicated investigators who took this on when our trillion-dollar national security protection apparatus failed us. It took two civilians to uncover all this.
And it seems clear to me that their motivation is pure patriotism, love for the United States and its liberty, because this is not something that they turned over all the evidence to the United States. They didn't try to sell it.
Oh, they're patriots, and they're the heroes of this story, and thank God for their efforts. We should all be thankful, and now it's in the hands of the Justice Department.
I agree with that 100%. Well, Ralph, congratulations on your book. Thanks for writing it. And thanks for doing this podcast with the Impunity Observer. And thanks to Gary, who's no longer with us.
Thank you very much, Steve. You do great work.